if it needs to be 0 or plus a half or minus a half to get the bump steer right, you better to deal with it that way.
And how as a driver are you telling, oh, I've got too much bump steer?
You won't know. You won't know unless the car's miles away. But a car that's got it correctly set will be much nicer to drive. It'll track nicely. It won't wander.
Just doing that with taking it back up and just doing it every inch, every 20 mil.
Every 10 mil. Every 10 mil. Yeah. You can do it up on the stand. The easiest way to do it is put your setup bars on, and in the front you just put some stops in here, and you disconnect it here, and you put a jack under the wheel, and you just lift the wheel up and down, and you just watch the toe, front to rear. And it doesn't matter what the numbers are, but the relationship between front and rear should stay the same as it goes up and down. And you can do the same with the rear. So once again, if it's got a very slight toe in, you know, up to a mil or so, not the end of the world, but you sometimes find a car that's got 1 mil on that wheel and 4 mils out on this wheel, and that happens quite regularly. So quite often you'll have casters different in the rear of the car, especially with the older cars with fabricated uprights, and you know, a lot of them are a bit bent and not perhaps quite geometrically correct. So okay, so camber's normally just adjusted on the top wishbone here. Shims at the back, good example. That's relatively self-explanatory. Once again, it's a case of setting all these things together and then going around and checking them all again, especially with the ride height. So everything that you adjust is going to adjust something else. So trying to keep it as close to where you want it when you start is a good idea.
The toe out is a huge adjustment.
The toe out is a very coarse adjustment. Yeah. I mean, these cars are so short in here, and the racks are quite slow relatively. One turn of that push rod, of that toe link, is about 6 millimetres. So it's a very coarse adjustment. To be very careful with it.
How much toe in on the rear do you have?
1 millimetre more.
Each wheel?
Yeah. Okay. So we've spoken briefly about springs earlier. It's important to make sure that you've checked them to make sure that they are actually pairs, and don't necessarily trust the markings. I mean, have them tested, put them on the car, see if you're happy with the way they function. But it's not a very difficult or expensive job to have them tested either. And once you've done it at the beginning of the year, you can put that out of your mind and you know that that's sorted. The droop we've talked about, that's adjusted by the platform height in the shock absorber, front and rear. And then we're going to move on to adjusting of the shocks. Anybody had to play with their shock absorbers?
Yep.
Yep.
Confused the shit out of myself.
Yep. Okay. So the first thing with most of these shock absorbers, they've all got canisters on them. I mean, the rear that's got Bilsteins on it, but these Öhlins here, for example, there's a canister there, and it's got a valve on it that's got to be full of nitrogen. Normally 120 psi, up to about as high as 150. And it has a Schrader valve on it, but don't put compressed air in it. It doesn't work. And it's not good for the insides of them either, because the air is full of water. You end up with milky water in there. So that's not a good thing. So it has to be nitrogen, and you will need, nitrogen regulators are generally pretty maxed out at about 150 psi, so you need a pretty good regulator to do that, and a valve and a gauge and stuff. I mean, we've got that facility here if you want to use us to do that. I mean, Robert's borrowed the bottle a few times for doing his. But, excuse me, these particular ones don't have a Schrader valve on them, they have a needle. So you need a particularly special piece of equipment to do that. They are a bit of a pain in the arse, to be fair. And the bump is the adjuster on the canister, the black knob, and the rebound is the one on the top. And there's generally 8 to 10 positions, so they go tick, 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 tick.
Do they hard out? Because mine don't, they just keep turning.
They shouldn't do that. Well, actually, if it's the early model shock, they will keep turning, and that's because they don't actually have a stop. But there is 6 positions, so wherever you set them is what they'll have, because they have basically a series. I think those shocks have got 2 or 3 plates with holes in them, and they just
So 1 to 6 is still 1 to 6 no matter how many times you've turned it around.
yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that you probably need to have them put on a dyno, and then we'll go like this, and you'll probably find that it doesn't matter where they are, knowing the way Mr. Borland sets those up.
So what's the point?
Oh, well, the point is they sell cars with adjustable shocks. And-
So we're wasting
and-
our time, Robert.
And if you don't,
Pissing around with that.
and if you don't, and if you twiddle them and it doesn't make any difference, well, whose problem is that?
Mine.
Exactly. So, I mean,
I
that needs
paid
to,
for the shocks, that's the problem.
that needs to be proved, of course. I mean, I'm not saying they are like that, obviously, but there's a lot of shocks that are set up where the knobs don't actually do anything. They're just there to
Make you
check
feel
your
good.
pocket, basically. That's very common. Okay, so we talked about springs, true. Now, the other big part of the shock absorber thing is that there's the shocks you're talking about have got numbers on them. The shock we're going to look at up top doesn't have any numbers, it's just got little adjusters. And this doesn't have any numbers on it either. So where are you going to adjust them to and from? So once again, you need a datum, so you need to know whether you're going to work from screwed all the way in or screwed all the way out. And that will depend a lot on the type of shock that you've got and the way it's set up inside. So you do need to know that. Penske always, most of their valving is done by a needle, and there's shims in there obviously which you can't adjust, but the valving changes are done via a needle in an orifice. So the most accurate way to do that is to wind it all the way in until it shuts off and then wind it back. Okay, so if you're using Penskes, that's how you do a Penske. They say that the Öhlins are done from all the way out. In my experience, it doesn't seem to matter too much because they are reasonably nice the way they are made, so you can work from in or out, but I think the convention is more from out. So you would go 0 would be out, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, rather than 1 or 0 and then wind it out. But that's all information that you need to look at your shocks and do some checking and find out how your shocks actually work. I mean, they can be all different, and just because they are one particular brand doesn't mean to say that they haven't been changed inside either, because you can't see inside them.
Well, what I did one time when Henry was giving me a hand, it's actually jumped on the car and see how quickly it rebounded and changed it. Actually, it's sort
Very
of
practical way to do it.
just it's quick or it's slow.
That's right. Yep, and that's the way to do it in the field. I mean, obviously with the equipment you can be a bit more scientific about it. One of the things which you can't do in the field very easily is check and see that they're a matched pair, and the shock dyno is very good at that, because you can run it and then you can run the graphs over top of each other without any trouble. And the matched pair thing, quite often you'll have one shock that's got 6 in the bump, and then the other one has to be on 8 to get the graph in the right place.
The car doesn't turn in the same on
You probably wouldn't
similar
notice
corners.
it. You wouldn't necessarily notice it, but it's not the way it should be, so it won't be giving you the optimum performance. And it's just a function of the machining tolerances in the shocks quite often, or you know, the way it's been assembled, or you know, there's lots of reasons. I know the shocks we use on these early 5000s, the very early 2812 Coney, the twin tube Coney, they're just shockingly bad at not being a pair. I mean, 2 or 3 races and then one shock's dead and the other one's still working fine, and it just drives you insane. The new modern shocks, they're a lot more reliable. But I mean, all those old Armstrongs that are on a lot of the older cars, they're inherently unreliable as well. But I mean, we'll sort of pass that. I mean, an old shock these days is one of these Bilstings, but very seldom do you ever have any trouble with a Bilsting. They just seem to go and go and go until you break the end off them.
Oh, really?
Pardon?
They can overheat, can't they? I'm pretty sure.
Well, all shocks can do that. Yeah. They don't suffer from that badly. They don't suffer from that too badly. Okay. So having a datum is the most important thing, and the same when you're dealing with the rebound side of it as well. We've talked about bump steer a bit already, so we'll gloss over that perhaps. The rake, we've also talked about that in the other part of it, and the spring preload, unless anybody's got any particular questions about that, that's relatively simple as well. The more preload you've got is winding the spring tighter, and the less preload is coming back the other way. Right, all the way to the point where the spring comes loose. Right. Probably questions at this stage, and then we'll go and have a quick look at some shocks.
John, rear caster, will that make a car squat under acceleration and behave differently?
Not necessarily, no, that's more of a function of the relationship between the height of that pickup and the height of that pickup. Yeah. And that's due to a function called anti-squat or anti-dive. An anti-dive is the one in the front normally, and the squat is, and you'll notice especially on the Spectrum, it's got 4 or 5, and the My Girls do too, 4 or 5 pickup points for the front wishbone and sometimes the rear as well. These cars in particular have decided that that's the place they want them to be, and there's not really many options, so they don't change them. The later model cars tend to have those multiple pickup points because they were actually designed for a different engine. It's different weight, it's got more power, so they've made it adjustable so that they can have it, so that they can get them to work with a Kent in it, get them to work with a Duratec in it, get them to work with a Honda Fit, get them to work with whatever engine whatever country's going to use. So they've made the cars a little more user friendly from a organisation's point of view. But anything else anybody like to go over car wise? We were going to have a quick look at this car and its rockers in the rear.
I guess it's just sequence. I mean, when I look at all the things that you've talked about tonight, and I scratch my head and go, now I'm just fucking confused.
That front page, if you read that front page carefully, it pretty much tells you
On everything, bump steer,
pretty much.
caster, camber, the sequence of doing things as well. And I really struggle, for example, when I've had access to a set of corner weight scales about the sequence of things, because I just get myself worse and worse and worse, and it just kept chasing my tail around in circles, just trying to chase the weight. Ended up going, oh fuck it, and going back to a neutral setup and accepting that I'm going to be 5 kilos or 20 kilos out on one tyre.
Well, I'll let you into a little secret. We've got a set of corner weight scales in that box there, and when we set a car up on this pad here, unless there's a dead shock or a duff spring, the corner weight scales go under the car, and you look at it and you go, okay, we'll put those away, because you don't actually need them. Because if you are pedantic about the measurements you take and levelling the car the way this says, and then lifting the back of the car in the middle like a 3-legged chair, and then adjusting the rear push rod so that when the car comes down both wheels touch the ground at the same time, you've got a 4-legged chair that is not going to rock, and therefore the problem's over. And you'll put the scales on and you'll take the anti-roll bars off, and you'll sit it there, and if there's a kilo in it, I'll eat my hat. I mean, we always do check it, but hardly ever change it. A quarter of a turn on a push rod sometimes. You'll sometimes pick up a duff spring, and a good thing to do is when you've got the car on the ground is just stand on it here and jump on it, like that. Try and do it in the middle. You see both of them moving together, and they both come off the stop at the same time. See that? Just moving. If the car's not square and these push rods aren't the right length and the car's not sitting square on the ground, one of these will move first, and that's the tilt.
So you basically, roll bars are one of the last things to go back on. Aren't they?
Always the last thing to go back.
So that's probably where people could get lost. If they've got them on, the corner weights would be very difficult to.
I mean, what you've got to remember is that the anti-roll bars don't affect the car going up and down. They just move like this. They just go up and down evenly. It's only when the car rolls does there any tension in those arms. So they don't need to be involved in that part of the equation at all. We'll just quickly go over, there's a few rocker cars around.